So we're going to go to Judges. We're going to go to chapter 4. Again, the Israelites did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and Ehud died. So Yahweh sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, who reigned in Hazor. The commander of his army was Sisera, and he was living in Harosheth Hagoyim. And the Israelites cried to Yahweh as he had 900 iron chariots, and he oppressed Israelites cruelly for 20 years. Verses 1 through 3 is doing a 3-verse version of the very long chapter 1 of Exodus, where you have a king who decides to oppress God's people. Now, before he oppresses them because out of this fear that they're going to come up against him. This one, they're sold into him because of their wickedness. Now, we don't know exactly what his motivation is, but what we do know is that the king is seeing this opportunity to oppress them, so he's playing a serpent figure here and oppressing them, and this is going to be something that seems good to him. The reason why I say you could say he's also playing Eve is because you have a commander who is then primarily talked about as being the one that does a lot of the oppressing later. And so it could be like one of them is really more Eve and one's more serpent, or they're both purely just serpent. And the opportunity for them here is to oppress Israel, probably for similar reasons. They don't want Israel to have power to rise up against them because, well, Israel has a history of being so small that they can still conquer you anyways. We want to make sure they don't ever do that, and they're going to prevent the blessing. Could you argue it's a little speculative? Sure. Here's what I'm going to say it's not. So Yavin, that'd be the Hebrew way of saying Jabin. So Yavin means he that understands, or wisdom. So we have literally one of the characters is called wisdom, he that understands. And wisdom is going to now use his wisdom to oppress the people. The other fun part is we have Sisera. Problem is this is a transliteration. It's probably Luwian or Hurrian, which means we don't really know what it means because it's not Semitic, which means it's not related to Hebrew or Ugarit or anything like that. But we do know that he is the one that is the vessel that is being used to go and do all these bad things. One scholar decided to just kind of play into what he kind of expects from this based on how the narrative plays out, and he overemphasizes and goes, Sisera. And his opinion is that there's a chance that this might be his actual name, or just might be a Luwian word that's like being used to describe this general as a snaky figure, because he's doing the oppressing. He's being a dragon. He's doing this. So he admits this completely speculative. Until we know anything about Luwian language, we don't really know. But what we do know is we have a character who is named Wisdom, who is using his wisdom to oppress Israel, which is what's happened in Exodus, by a king who's oppressed his people. And we know that that oppression thing is tied to a dragon motif. And this would be the thing that seems right to him to do, for whatever exactly the reason is. So, if we're to go back to like verse 3, then the people of Israel cried to Yahweh for help, for he had 900 chariots of iron, and he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. So we have he that understands uses said wisdom to oppress and attack Israel. He's doing what seems good to him and oppresses them. The Genesis 3 and Exodus 1 parallels are not by coincidence. The author wants us to see that this is another event in which a person, nation, or power desires to attack another nation, person, or power. A seed of the serpent at enmity with that of the woman. You have to remember that the seed of the serpent motif is typically that it's not just like there's a testing moment, but it is two seeds are in conflict with each other, or one person is in conflict with which side is he going to choose. We talked about a few weeks ago with David. He has to choose. Is he going to go the way of Yahweh, or is he going to go the way of the serpent talk of killing Saul? With Ham, we saw that he plays both characters. So he saw for himself and he took whatever tempted him. Maybe that was a collection of things that could be. And he goes, I'm going to take. And then he also goes and deceives or just tells and says, go do this. So the idea is that still, whether it be internally or externally between two figures, there's this tension between the two. And often those who gives into the seed of the serpent often do a lot of oppressing and murdering and slaughtering of Israel, or the people at seed of the woman. So being the seed of the serpent is not merely just misusing wisdom, nor merely deceiving another. It seems to be that a seed of the serpent is to bring gain to oneself and loss to another, regardless of the consequences. If it means misery, separation, curses, death, so be it. The end goal is for you, not God, nor his creation. You pretty much decide to go apart from him, and you're therefore an agent of disorder. Because death is effectively, in their minds, disorder and exile. We're already getting set up within these first 3 little verses of, hey, we have a little dragon motif going on here. But because Judges 4 is so fun, we're just going to keep reading anyways, because it's just a fun time. So within here, what we get is Barak is with Deborah, who is providing this wisdom of discernment of what is going to happen. But then Barak, instead of going with what she originally stated, says, no, I'll only go if you go with me. Which seems to be more of him. He just got God's word through her mouth. So he has God's word. He has this is going to happen. And instead, he seems to think that it will only be effective if she's there, meaning that his word is not enough. He needs the prophet there. He needs the judge there, as if that's going to bring more of God's fulfillment or more of God's promise. Deborah then goes, then you're not going to get the glory. You'll still win. You won't get the glory. The things that were promised to you, you're going to get part of it. You're not going to get all of it. The blessing's going to be gone, basically. Kind of like a little testing moment for Barak, of which you could tie into the whole Eve narrative. You also could just go a little bit closer in time of the book. You could also ties with Moses. You're being promised, you're going to get this, like, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to do great things through you. I don't believe you. I ain't doing it. Fine, then you don't get to do it. You're going to do part of it, but the other person's going to be the one that is done fully through you. We then they go out, they get ready to battle, and, Sisera is not doing so hot. It says that this is the day that Yahweh has given Sisera into your hands. This is to Barak, but this would be obviously Sisera in the representative sense, meaning his army is losing. He's losing this battle because we already know that the full glory of the defeat of Sisera will come later by someone else, not by Barak. And so there's a defeat happening, but obviously not the full glory, because you then have Sisera dismounts from his chariot and fled on foot. Basically, slithered away, if you will. If he's the snake, he's just slipping away like, you're all fine. You all can die without me. As long as I live, we're chill. Because he doesn't want to get cut by a head of the sword. And so Barak pursued after the chariots and the army as far as Harosheth Hagoyim, and all of Sisera's army fell to the edge of the sword. No one was left. God gives Sisera into the hands of Barak in the representative sense, meaning the army is conquered and defeated. But we still have what Deborah said, that Barak would not be the one that has the full glory in conquering. So Sisera sneaks off. We know there's supposed to be a woman who's supposed to be the defeater and get the glory. So Yael, the wife of Hever, the Canaanite, that's an interesting little thing there. It's with the vowels of Canaanite, but is the exact same consonants of Cain, as in Cain and Abel. So we have this inversion already. We're seeing that there is a woman instead of most of the figures we see are primarily male. Now we have a woman figure who is of Cain's lineage, rather than like Abraham's lineage. There was peace between Yavin, king of Hazor, and the house of Hever, the Canaanite, and Yael came out to meet Sisera. And she said to him, turn aside, my lord, and we get the whole back and forth where she kind of brings him in, and he's like basically trying to convince her to deceive everyone that he's not here, and then she deceives her. She's like, yeah, I'll do that for you. He goes to sleep. So we have a Genesis 3, you could say here, but it's all inverted. Or you could say just every testimony is all inverted. We have a person of a nation that's usually opposing God's covenant people, aka Cain killing Abel. You have it being a woman primarily, then mostly being a man. You also have that this woman actually crushes a serpent rather than the serpent getting them or just passing by and saying, God can do it. God said, nah, she's going to do it. And then she pegs him straight through the head, and we crush the serpent. So we have a victorious moment here. We have a serpent that's been crushed, a seed of the serpent that's been crushed, which is interesting because we're like, wait, but this isn't the serpent crusher, but it's a serpent crusher. Parallels back to Genesis 3's curse are quite clear, in my opinion, if I were to read that section for the serpent. And Yahweh Elohim said to the Nachash, because you have done this, cursed are you more than any of the cattle and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go. We don't know if he was actually lying on his belly or not. And dust you will eat all the days of your life. Well, he was laying down.
Certainly bit the dust.
He definitely bit the dust. And I'll put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise you on the head. Well, more than a bruising right now. We got a peg through the head. And you shall bruise him on the heel. Yeah, let's remember why they're in this position to begin with. Verse 1 states, and again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of Yahweh, and Ehud died. Which means, I like how one commentator put for the entire book of Judges, each judge is just seeing the further, the more pagan or the more like the Canaanites, or the Canaanites even, those two different people groups, Israel becomes like. They become less and less as God's holy people and more like everyone else. And you just see this progressively get worse. And Judges is a mixture of, there's a lot of cool, hopeful moments and a lot of this is the sad reality of the world around it. I think with some theologies out there, we tend to act like God only works within his covenant people with certain frameworks, when it's just clearly not the case. When you have a woman who is from Cain's lineage, not of Israel, is doing the grunt work here. We'll go to 1 Samuel 17. I'm going to read this one because I make 2 translation changes, and I want you guys to be able to see them as we go through the text. Verse 4, then a champion went out from the camps of the Philistines, whose name was Goliath from Gath. His height was 6 cubits and a span. He had a helmet of bronze on his head and scaly armor. The weight of the coat, or the armor, was 5,000 shekels of bronze, and he had bronze armor on his legs, and a javelin of bronze slung between his shoulders. The shaft of the spear was like a weaver's beam, and the spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and the shield bearer went before him. I understand why they say coat of mail, because they're trying to go with more of a specific picture. Here's the only weird part of that. There's two Hebrew words there of importance for that part. So shiryon means body armor, coat of mail, relatively flexible military scale of body armor for protection in stopping piercing weapons, breastplate, scale armor, coat of armor. So that's fine already. You can still say, sure, it means mail armor. That's the first Hebrew word, though. It's important to recognize that because there's a word that comes immediately after that. And it's kasim, means scale, as in scale of fish. If I were to pull up the exact count of the words used, it is used 8 times. If I were to look at the ESV, 7 of those 8 times is in reference to a sea creature. When I have scaly, so I put it in, when I said scaly armor, armor would be shiron, and then kasim. Every other instance is used is in reference to sea creatures. Every single other usage, except this one. It'd be better, that's why I go with scaly armor, which then makes sense when you have 4 other mentions of things being bronze. A bronze head, bronze shekel, the weight of bronze armor on his legs, a bronze javelin. You got a bronze serpent right here. You got a bronze sea creature. It's just all over there, right up in your face. To comment on the bronze, nechoshet means copper or bronze, or an alloy of copper and tin and possibly other elements from which many different utensils and items are manufactured, because bronze is used very, very frequently for a variety of things, hence his armor, or like his armor. And it's not by accident that we have this copper bronze thing with a scaly armor. That's why I don't like mail. I get why they're doing it. They're trying to describe more of the layering of the material but they use the word for fish scales. It would be a small, flattened, rigid, round plates on the skin of a fish. Sometimes, and it will mention some lexicons, mail or coat, like M-A-I-L. I was like, no, let's just be honest. Every other instance you use this is for a fish. Let's not play this game right here. The use of bronze was common within the biblical narrative, but there seems to be an emphasis on the fact that almost every piece of Goliath's armor was bronze, and that his armor was that of scales. Bronze/copper head, scale body, bronze, copper, everything else. Other interesting component is the word for bronze, nechoshet. If you remember our little discussion about Hebrew roots and how Hebrew roots deal with the consonants. Nechoshet, same root as nachash. So we have nun, we have ket, and we have sheen. Hebrew roots function with primarily 3, because you can have an extra one if you're changing different parts of the word to kind of get something. Nechoshet, which is the word for bronze and copper, has the root of nachash built in. And when you have root words, there's usually a tie between those words. Has nun, ket, and sheen, as well as tav, and then nachash has nun, ket, and sheen. What I'm pointing out is the fact that nechoshet means bronze, and he's described as a scaly figure. And everything's bronze, nechoshet, and he's scaly. Nechoshet's also tied with nachash in terms of its root. My point is that the Hebrew is being abundantly clear that Goliath is a serpent dragon. That Goliath, as we know, is a giant. He would be known as a gibor, which is related to Nephilim. And we know that later. But here, he's been described as a giant dragon that is trying to oppress Israel, or trying to scare Israel into submission. So what's also interesting is that the same root, if we got rid of the last letter of nechoshet, that root also has another word that means bronze with the same exact, just the 3, without the 4th consonant for bronze. So it's all connected. Serpent, bronze, diviner, deceiver, all those words are connected together by the same set of roots. And so Goliath would be a giant who's depicted as a scaly monster in opposition to Israel, one that David will go out, or technically David, will go out to battle with just a sling and 5 stones. So there's a lot of verses between verse 7 and the actual event of the fight, aka verse 49, where David does this little, I'm going to throw a stone at you. So we're going to just jump there. I think this story is fairly familiar for most of us that we can get there. Then David put his hand into the bag and took a stone from it and slung it. He struck the Philistine on his forehead, and the stone sank into his forehead, and he fell on his face to the ground. Yahweh Elohim said to the serpent, "Because you have done this, cursed are you more than any of the cattle, and more than every beast of the field. On your belly you will go. Well, to fall on your face, you fall on your belly. And dust you shall eat all of the days of your life. His face is down and it's in the dust. I'll put enmity between you and the woman." Well, clearly enmity right there. "And between your seed and her seed, he shall bruise you on the head." David doesn't stop there, though. This is verse 50. So David prevailed over the Philistine with the sling and with the stone, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. But there was no sword in David's hand. Then David ran and stood over the Philistine and took his sword and drew it from his sheath and killed him and cut off his head with it. Then the Philistines saw that their champion was dead and they fled. Obviously, what we're getting here is we're getting a serpent crushing event. Israel's again being opposed. They're all cowering in fear. Philistines want to conquer. David comes in to fight this person who is described as being all in bronze and has fish armor. David strikes him in the head and cuts his head off, and he falls down on his belly and into the dust. And it's all over right there. This is a seed of the serpent that has been conquered by David. David, as we've mentioned in a previous session, will have another few testing moments. 2 of them that we've spent time on, he overcomes, and he doesn't really kill a serpent. He actually, instead of seeing the opportunity there, he turns to God and turns to Saul and says, "Let it not be me who does this. Let it be you who decides who will reign and when the time come." and how it should be done. Let it not be me who makes that decision. I want it completely, totally up to you. He's a few other moments as well, but then we have the famous Bathsheba one where instead of him overcoming, we have so many overcoming moments for David, but we also have several not so good moments. That one being probably the most famous one. So yeah, we could honestly, there's so many passages where you could trace specifically the Genesis 3 motif with Nachash, Eve, and tree, as well as a figure who is being opposed by someone, and either God's working through them in some capacity, or it just kind of just doesn't really talk a lot about God, but you know God's involved. Like Yael doesn't really mention a whole lot about God doing something, whereas David gives full glory to God, and Moses, it says like God does this and God does this after Moses does this. But we know that he said that she's going to do it, and therefore he was involved in some capacity. However you want to describe like that in comparison to Exodus with hey, pick up your staff. Okay. And just moves the water over. But that I think be kind of missing the point of the rest of the study. And I think this kind of makes it clear that within these parts of the narrative, it is clear that part of the dragon motif is that anyone, literally anyone, you can be of God's covenant people and still participate as this, can play the role of the serpent and be one who is seeking to bring downfall to others and gain to yourself. As we've done many times with the serpent, or the devil specifically, his ultimate desire wasn't necessarily just to bring Adam and Eve like out of union with God. It was his way of trying to usurp God's authority by getting them to align with him. So for his gain, he didn't care about them. He just wanted his gain. And for Egypt, it was the oppression because it was for their protection, which would be their gain. We don't really know what the motive was for Yavin. We can speculate based on previous kings and how they kind of work. Or even Avram, where he's in fear and doesn't want things to happen to him. Complete neglect for others and only for your self-gain. Often, for many of these, is bring them to a state of disorder or to death even. And it is playing that role of the serpent, being in disorder, being in disunion with God, dragging other people into that disorder, not really caring how many people you drag down with you. And so we see that many people can play this role. We're going to see it in the New Testament as well, that people play this role. But when we enter into the wisdom literature, it's going to kind of go back to the Genesis discussion, where now we're talking about the cosmic scale. Like, okay, we talk about the sin, that the problem of humanity is that they can either choose to align with God or choose to be in disunion with God. And we seem to be like, no one's really safe from that. People just keep kind of disuniting from God and realigning, the disuniting, and all these things. And now we're going to get to this cosmological discussion that there seems to be something out there that seems to be having an effect on that has some kind of role in participating in that, or is even forget working through humans. I'm just going to do it directly myself, and that will be where we kind of turn to next.